My family gave me a world's biggest disappointment mug for Father's Day. They all laughed, my wife recorded it for TikTok, and my kids cheered. So, I smiled, washed their dishes, and walked out of their lives at 1 a.m. without a single word. Father's Day in our household was never a grand production. There were no charcoal-scented cookouts that lasted until sundown, no hand-painted cards with macaroni hearts, and certainly no sentimental speeches about the pillar of the family. Usually, it was just a series of brief functional nods in my direction. A Happy Father's Day, Dad, muttered over a bowl of cereal, or perhaps a generic gift card if someone had remembered to swing by the drugstore. I never complained. I'm not the type of man who needs a parade to feel validated. I'm Sean, 46 years old, and for 18 years I've been the silent engine of this family. I work as a maintenance supervisor at a local factory. It's a gritty, unglamorous existence defined by the smell of industrial grease and the weight of a heavy tool belt, but it kept the lights on. It kept Angela, my wife, comfortable. It kept our 3 kids, Emily, 17, Josh, 15, and little Owen, 9, clothed and fed. I always believed that showing up mattered. I thought that being the guy who fixed the leaky faucets, paid the mortgage on time, and picked the kids up from practice was enough to earn a seat at the table of their hearts. I was wrong. The shift into the background, lately, the atmosphere in the house had soured. I'd gone from being a father to a piece of furniture. Angela, who has always been the cool parent with the bubbly charisma and the quick wit, seemed to be drifting into a separate orbit. When I'd walk through the door after a 10-hour shift, Emily wouldn't even look up from her phone. I'd just get a low grunt from the couch. Josh only acknowledged my existence when his debit card hit a 0 balance. I told myself it was just teenagers being teenagers. I told myself Angela was just tired from work. I swallowed the loneliness because that's what a stable man does. The joke that broke the camels back when Father's Day morning arrived this year, I expected the usual minimum effort. Instead, I walked into the kitchen to find a scene that looked suspiciously like a celebration. All 3 kids and Angela were gathered at the table, wearing grins that were entirely too wide for 9 a.m. Josh pushed a small wrapped box toward me. "Got you something, Dad," he said, his voice straining to hold back a snicker. I noticed Emily immediately. She had her phone out, the camera lens pointed directly at my face, recording. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they had finally seen me? Maybe this was a genuine thank you? I opened the box. Inside was a plain white ceramic mug. In bold, unapologetic black letters, it read, "World's Biggest Disappointment." The silence lasted for maybe a heartbeat. Then the kitchen exploded. It wasn't a playful giggle or a gotcha tease. It was raucous, belly-deep laughter. Angela snorted into her coffee, her eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. Josh slapped the table so hard the silverware rattled. Emily turned the phone toward me, capturing my stunned expression for whatever group chat was waiting for the content. I stood there, the weight of that cheap ceramic mug feeling like a lead anchor in my hand. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel the heat of anger. I felt nothing, a cold, hollow clarity. I looked at the people I had spent 2 decades providing for, and I realized they didn't just dislike me. They thought my life was a punchline. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I actually smiled. I walked over to the sink and began scrubbing the remains of the breakfast they had enjoyed without me. I washed their plates, dried the pans, and put the gift in the cupboard. The silent exit. I spent the rest of the day playing the part. I took Owen for ice cream because I had promised him. I mowed the lawn under the blistering sun. I folded a mountain of laundry. I kept busy so I wouldn't have to look them in the eye. But inside, the silence was deafening. It was the sound of 18 years of effort evaporating. At 1 a.m., when the house was thick with the rhythmic breathing of people who felt perfectly safe and entitled, I got up. I didn't pack much. A few changes of clothes, my essential work tools, some cash I'd kept aside, and a single photograph of Owen from when he was 5. Back when he still looked at me like I was a hero. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I didn't slam the door to wake the neighbors. I simply turned the key, stepped onto the porch, and drove away, the aftermath. It's been 2 weeks. Yesterday, a friend sent me a screenshot of Angela's Facebook post. It was a photo of me at Owen's soccer game. I looked exhausted, sunburnt, and haggard, but I was holding a Gatorade for my son, with a look of pure, tired pride. Her caption read, "Please, if anyone knows where Sean is, tell him we just want him home. We miss him so much." The comments are filled with prayers and stay strong messages from people who think I'm having a midlife crisis or that I've suffered a breakdown. They don't know about the mug. They don't know that my loving family sat at a table and laughed at the fact that I've given them everything only to be labeled a failure. They don't realize that this wasn't about a single joke. It was about the years of being an ATM that fixes toilets. It was about the realization that I was a stranger in my own home. I'm currently 3 states away, staying in a small motel near a construction site that needs a supervisor. For the first time in 20 years, the only person I have to take care of is myself. And honestly, the silence out here is a lot more peaceful than the laughter back there. As I sat in the cab of my truck, miles away from the life I once knew, I started replaying the tapes. Not just the highlight reels, but the tiny dismissals, the quiet jabs, and those barbed, backhanded compliments that I had spent years smiling through. That was the moment of chilling clarity. I hadn't just been ignored. I had been slowly, meticulously erased from my own life. This story isn't really about a cheap ceramic mug. It's about the anatomy of a breaking point. It's about what happens when the family punchline finally decides to stop waiting for the laugh and walks off the stage. It's about the crushing weight of learning exactly what they thought of me, and the fallout that occurs when the disappointment finally disappoints everyone by leaving them to fix their own lives. But to understand the exit, you have to understand the slow rot that preceded it. Long before Father's Day, back when the disrespect was still wrapped in practiced smiles and suburban etiquette. The normal facade. If you asked Angela, she'd tell you our marriage was normal. She loved that word. It was her shield. To her, normal meant routines. Friday night pizza, Saturday morning soccer, bills paid like clockwork, and a lawn trimmed to the exact quarter inch. From the outside, we looked like a rock-solid unit. But inside those routines, I was becoming wallpaper. I was a background utility, always there, perfectly functional, and entirely easy to ignore. Angela was the undisputed star of the show. She was the PTA board member, the architect of every bake sale, the curator of an Instagram feed filled with #BlessedLifeFamily photos. She was a master at playing the role of the perfect wife, and for a long time I didn't mind. I'm a quiet guy. I liked staying behind the curtain, holding the ropes while she took the applause. But somewhere along the way, she stopped sharing the spotlight and started writing me out of the script entirely, the erasure. It started with the small stuff, the kind of things you tell yourself aren't worth a fight. At parent-teacher conferences, she'd introduce herself with a dazzling practice smile as Emily's mom. Me? I was just Sean. Not my husband. Not Emily's father. Just a guy tagging along, occasionally acknowledged only if the teacher looked confused as to why I was sitting there. I remember once trying to chime in on Josh's progress report. I started to voice a concern about his math grades, and Angela cut me off mid-sentence. She patted my arm with a condescending chuckle and told the teacher, "Oh, don't mind him. Sean doesn't really follow all the school stuff. He's more of a tool shed kind of guy." A tool shed kind of guy. Like my entire existence was summarized by a pile of rusted wrenches and a bag of mulch. I let it go. That was my specialty. I let things go until there was nothing left to hold on to. The weaponized favoritism. Then there was the way she tiered the kids. Angela worshipped Emily. Maybe it was some mirrored version of herself, or maybe something deeper. Emily got new clothes every season, a $700 phone because she was responsible, and constant praise. Josh, our middle child, could have burned the house down and Angela would have called it creative expression. He skipped homework, gamed until 3 a.m., and even dented the SUV backing out of the driveway. Angela just laughed it off. "Boys will be boys, Sean. Don't be so rigid." But Owen, my sweet, quiet 9-year-old, he had to earn every breath he took. If he spilled a drop of juice, he got a full-blown lecture on awareness. If he left a backpack on the floor, Angela would sigh with this performative exhaustion and say, "Honestly, Owen, sometimes I feel like you're turning into your father." She didn't mean it as a compliment. She meant it as a warning of impending failure. It tore me apart to see him shrink under the weight of those words. He was the best of the three of them. Thoughtful, kind, always trying to be useful. I'd catch him folding towels in the laundry room, doing it all wrong, of course, just because he wanted to help. I tried to bridge the gap. I'd pick him up from school, sneak him chocolate milk during grocery runs, and try to be the shield he needed. But even that drew Angela's fire. "You baby him too much," she'd snap. "No wonder he clings to you. You're making him soft." So I backed off. I let it go. Again. The final snap, the barbecue. The week before Father's Day was when the mask finally slipped. Angela planned a massive family barbecue. Actually, planned isn't the right word. She orchestrated it for her social circle. Her sister, her friends, even an old college roommate. I wasn't invited. I was notified. On the morning of, I was handed a literal honey-do list. Clean the grill, buy extra buns, move the patio furniture, and, this was the kicker, try to look presentable. I spent the entire afternoon flipping burgers in the heat while Angela floated through the crowd like a hostess on autopilot, sipping Chardonnay and basking in the attention. I didn't mind the work. I'm used to it. But then I walked into the living room with a fresh platter of meat and caught the tail end of a conversation. Angela was center stage, wine glass in hand, her voice carrying that mocking melodic lilt she used when she wanted to be funny. "Oh, please," she laughed. "Sean's idea of a wild weekend is watching History Channel reruns and falling asleep by 9 o'clock. He's basically a human lawn ornament at this point." The room erupted. Her sister, her friends, even Emily, who was sitting on the carpet scrolling through her phone. They all laughed. I stood there for a heartbeat, invisible in the doorway. I realized then that I wasn't a partner or a father or even a friend. I was a prop used to make her life look more vibrant by comparison. I didn't make a scene. I backed out quietly, set the plate on the counter, and grabbed a beer. I didn't drink it with the guests. I went into the garage and sat on a plastic crate next to the water heater, listening to the muffled sounds of my family laughing without me. The mug they gave me a week later wasn't a surprise. It was just the official confirmation of the status I'd held for years. But inside, the silence was deafening. It was the sound of 18 years of effort evaporating. At 1 a.m., when the house was thick with the rhythmic breathing of people who felt perfectly safe and entitled, I got up. I didn't pack much. A few changes of clothes, my essential work tools, some cash I'd kept aside, and a single photograph of Owen from when he was 5. Back when he still looked at me like I was a hero. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I didn't slam the door to wake the neighbors. I simply turned the key, stepped onto the porch, and drove away, the aftermath. It's been 2 weeks. Yesterday, a friend sent me a screenshot of Angela's Facebook post. It was a photo of me at Owen's soccer game. I looked exhausted, sunburnt, and haggard, but I was holding a Gatorade for my son with a look of pure, tired pride. Her caption read, "Please, if anyone knows where Sean is, tell him we just want him home." We missed that night, after the last of the barbecue guests had staggered out and the house felt heavy with the scent of burnt charcoal and cheap wine. Angela found me. I was in the laundry room, the rhythmic hum of the dryer the only thing keeping me grounded as I folded a mountain of towels. "You okay?" she asked. Her voice had that telltale slur, the fuzzy edge of a woman who had enjoyed 3 too many glasses of Chardonnay. "Fine," I replied, not looking up. My hands moved mechanically, corner to corner, smooth stack. "You're quiet," she noted, leaning against the doorframe. Then with a dismissive wave of her hand, she added, "Just tired, I guess. But honestly, Sean, don't be so sensitive, babe. It was just jokes. Lighten up." Just jokes. She had said it 1,000 times before. She said it when Josh started mimicking my heavy, tired walk after a double shift. She said it when Emily rolled her eyes so hard they nearly retreated into her skull whenever I dared to speak at the dinner table. She said it about the disappointment mug later on. To her, my dignity was a small price to pay for a laugh. But as I stood there in the flickering fluorescent light of the laundry room, I realized the jokes weren't funny anymore. They were eulogies for the man I used to be. The $1,200 paper cut. The true breaking point, the moment the foundation finally crumbled, came the Friday before Father's Day. I was checking my email after a grueling day at the factory when an invoice popped up. Amount due, $1,200. Angela had signed Emily up for a summer writing workshop at a prestigious private arts center downtown. 6 weeks of creative discovery. I stared at the screen for a long time, the numbers blurring. We hadn't discussed this. We hadn't even mentioned it. That night, I brought it up. I tried to be the stable one. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low as she scrolled through her phone in bed. "Did you already register Emily for this workshop?" I just saw the invoice. Angela didn't even blink. "Yeah. Why?" "It's just, that's a big expense, Ange. $1,200 is a lot of overtime. I thought we'd talk about it first." She finally looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to sharp annoyance. "She needs this, Sean. You know how much she wants to get into that arts magnet program? This is her future." "I get that," I said, my heart starting to thud against my ribs. "I just wish we had—" "Oh my God, it's not a big deal," she snapped, tossing her phone onto the duvet. "Why do you always have to make things so difficult? You're so negative." "I'm not trying to be difficult," I said, my voice eerily even. "I just think we should agree on big financial decisions. We're a team, right?" She scoffed, a sound of pure, unadulterated derision. "You don't care about her future? You never support anything that actually matters." That one hit bone. Not because it was true. I had spent 17 years sacrificing my back and my sleep for her future, but because I realized she actually believed her own lie. To her, I wasn't the provider. I was just the obstacle. I slept on the couch that night. Not because she banished me, but because the air in our bedroom felt toxic. I couldn't stomach being horizontal next to someone who viewed me as nothing more than dead weight, the only one who saw me. The next morning, the house was quiet. I was sitting on the edge of the sofa, lacing up my work boots, preparing to head into another shift I didn't want to work. Small footsteps padded across the hardwood. It was Owen. He didn't say anything. He just crawled into my lap and laid his small, warm head on my shoulder. I smelled the faint scent of maple syrup and sleep on him. "Dad?" he whispered. "Yeah, bud?" "You're not a disappointment." My breath hitched. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how much he had heard or how much he had sensed, but his words felt like a bandage on a jagged wound. I just held him tighter, burying my face in his hair, wishing I could stay in that moment forever. The departure. You already know about the mug on Sunday morning. You know about the laughter. But you don't know what happened after I packed that bag at 1 a.m. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a full hour. The engine was cold, and so was I. Part of me, the old, conditioned part, wanted to go back inside. I thought about Owen's face. But then, like a sick highlight reel, I thought about the barbecue. I thought about the invoice. I thought about the way Josh didn't even flinch when he handed me that mug, his eyes full of a cruel teenage hunger for clout. I thought about Emily smirking behind her camera, waiting for me to break so she could post it. I turned the key. I drove away. I didn't leave a note. Why bother? I didn't think they'd actually read it. They'd probably just find a way to edit it into a joke for the group chat. The silence of the motel. For 2 weeks, I lived out of a cheap extended stay motel on the edge of town. I called the factory and burned through every bit of sick time, vacation pay, and unpaid leave I had accumulated over a decade. I shut off my phone. I let it buzz itself into oblivion in the glove box of my truck. I stayed in the dark for 10 days. But curiosity is a persistent bitch. On day 10, I powered it up. 43 missed calls, 112 text messages. The arc of the messages told the whole story. Day 1 to 2. Anger. Where are you? This isn't funny, Sean. Seriously, grow up and come home. The grass needs cutting. Day 3 to 5. Inconvenience. The kids are asking questions. I can't find the login for the utility bill. This is selfish. Day 7 to 10. Fear. I'm worried. Please just call. Emily's been crying. Owen isn't eating. He just sits by the window. Then, the link to the Facebook post. The public plea. The perfect family photo. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because looking at those messages, I realized I didn't believe her. I didn't believe she missed me. She missed the maintenance supervisor. She missed the ATM. She missed the man who took the jokes, so she didn't have to look at her own flaws. I spent those nights in the motel writing. I made a list of every slight, every backhanded comment, and every time I had been treated like an afterthought. It was pages long. And as the list grew, a new thought began to take root. What if I didn't go back? What if I did something bold? Something they would never expect from the quiet, boring guy. See, that's the thing about treating someone like a disappointment. You never expect them to actually disappoint you back. You think they'll stay because they have nowhere else to go. You think they'll take the hits because they always have. But I was done taking hits. And before I left town for good, I had one last conversation with Angela, a conversation that would change everything. You want to know the truth about rock bottom? It doesn't always announce itself with fireworks, screaming matches, or a dramatic exit. Sometimes it's just the sound of a flickering fluorescent light in a motel lobby at 6 a.m. It's the smell of mildew and stale cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains. It's sitting on a poly-blend bedspread, drinking a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee, and watching CNN on mute while you wonder if anyone would truly notice if you just disappeared for good. That's where I was 3 weeks after I walked out. I didn't have a master plan. I wasn't some cinematic hero driving into the sunset to find myself. I was just a 46-year-old man in a dusty Ford F-150 who couldn't stomach the thought of being a punchline for one more second. But freedom without a purpose? It doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like floating in deep water, waiting for your lungs to give out, living as Steve. The motel was a dump. $49.99 a night, no housekeeping unless you practically begged, and a vending machine that only gave out expired muffins. I paid cash for the first 2 weeks, watching my physical currency dwindle while my emotional bank account stayed firmly at zero. I sat there, chewing on my breakfast, realizing he was right. I wasn't a disappointment. I was just a man who had finally run out of reasons to stay. But as much as I loved the peace of Maple Hollow, I knew I couldn't stay in hiding forever. Because Angela was still calling. And eventually, I was going to have to pick up the phone and tell her exactly what she could do with that mug. I didn't offer Brian any more details, and true to the unspoken code of Maple Hollow, he didn't pry. That was the beauty of this place. It was a town of doers, not talkers. Nobody cared about your resume or your past failures as long as you showed up when the pipes burst or the roof leaked. I was no longer the man defined by what I wasn't doing for Angela. I was just the guy who got things done. With the cash I'd scraped together from the construction site and my small stash of savings, I bought a used truck. It was a 2008 Silverado with a nasty dent in the driver's side door and air conditioning that blew nothing but hot, humid air, but the engine purred with a rugged, reliable heart. I spent my weekends under that hood, greasy up to my elbows, replacing gaskets and tinkering with the belt. Every bolt I tightened felt like I was tightening the loose parts of my own soul. I wasn't just fixing a truck. I was rebuilding a man. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself wandering into a tiny, cramped bookstore squeezed between a florist and a nail salon. The air inside smelled of vanilla and aging paper. I walked out with a paperback titled The Art of Not Being Invisible. It was a bit self-help cheesy, but one line in the 3rd chapter hit me like a physical blow. If you are always the one making things work, people eventually stop noticing that you are the reason everything still works. I sat on a park bench and read that sentence over and over. It was the story of my life. I was the silent foundation of a house that thought it could stay standing without me. The ghost in the bar. By the 3rd month, the fog had truly lifted. I felt human again. I felt strong. I started frequenting a local haunt on Friday nights, A low-key spot with a dartboard that had seen better days and a jukebox that played old-school outlaw country. I made friends, real friends. People like Sarah, who ran the hardware store, and Mark, a retired teacher. They didn't know me as Angela's husband or the disappointment. They knew me as Sean, the guy who was surprisingly good at darts and always had a spare fuse in his pocket. Then the world collided. I was leaning against the bar, watching a trivia night, when a face from my past walked through the door. It was Derek, Angela's cousin. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. I almost dropped my glass. Derek was always the loudest guy at the family BBQs, usually the first one to join in when Angela started her lighthearted ribbing. He didn't see me at first, but when our eyes finally locked, his entire face shifted. His jaw tightened and he walked over like he was seeing a ghost. "Sean," he breathed, sounding genuinely rattled. I nodded, my voice steady. "Hey, Derek." "What happened, man?" "People thought you were dead. Angela, she's been a wreck. She's posted all over Facebook, calling every hospital, every morgue. She told everyone you just abandoned them." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my beer. "Not dead, just needed out." Derek pulled up a stool, his eyes scanning me with a mix of confusion and something that looked a lot like respect. "She said you snapped. She told everyone you left over a stupid mug and that you were having some kind of mental breakdown." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she tell you what was on the mug, Derek?" His brow furrowed. "The what?" "No, she just said it was a Father's Day joke that you took way too seriously." I laughed. A dry, hollow sound. "Never mind. It doesn't matter." Derek looked around the bar, then back at me. "You're living out here? In Maple Hollow?" "Yeah." "Damn," he muttered. "You look different. You look happier." I didn't say anything. I just shrugged. Let the silence do the work. Derek tapped the counter nervously. "Look, I'm not here to drag you back. That's between you and her. But for what it's worth, I always thought they treated you like crap, especially Emily. That girl's got all of Angela's sarcasm with absolutely none of her charm. It was hard to watch sometimes." That floored me. I always thought Derek was part of the pack, but here he was, admitting he'd seen the cracks all along. "She never changed the locks, you know," Derek continued. "Your stuff is still in the house. She hasn't boxed a single thing. She keeps telling everyone you'll come back, that you just needed a break. Like you're on some weird, extended vacation." The tool shed guy builds a digital empire. That conversation haunted me, sigh. Angela didn't think I had left. She thought I was blowing off steam. She didn't realize that the man who lived in that house was dead, and the man sitting in Maple Hollow had no intention of being resurrected in her world. That night, I went back to my studio apartment and did something I hadn't done in over a year. I opened my old laptop and dug through a dusty folder of bookmarks. Before the marriage had turned into a graveyard, I'd had an idea for a side project during my night shifts at the factory. It was a tool review website. No corporate sponsorships, no influencer fluff, just honest, gritty reviews for guys like me who wanted to know if a drill was going to last through a winter or if it was a piece of plastic junk. I'd registered the domain name https://www.q.the.com/Q=thestraightedgetools.com. Written a few posts and then let it rot because Angela told me it was a waste of time and a stupid hobby. But now I had nothing but time. Every night after my shift at the senior complex, I worked. I tested tools, I recorded voiceovers on my phone, and I taught myself basic web design through YouTube tutorials. I bought a cheap, high-quality microphone and started filming video reviews in my small kitchen. Within a month, the site was live. Within 2 months, I was actually seeing traffic. Real people were commenting. "Thanks, Sean, this saved me $200. Great breakdown, man, keep it coming." For the first time in my adult life, I was building something that was mine. Not ours, not the family's, mine. I wasn't background noise, I was capable. I was smart, I was reliable. I had just allowed them to convince me otherwise. But as the fog continued to lift and the affiliate checks started trickling in, a new, sharper question began to form in the back of my mind. If Angela really thought I was just on vacation, what would happen when she realized I was actually building a new world? One where she didn't have a VIP pass. If I could rebuild my sense of self from the wreckage of a 20-year marriage, what else was I capable of reconstructing? That was the question that kept me awake in my small studio in Maple Hollow. Somewhere out there, back in the suburbs, a woman was still curating a digital shrine to her own victimhood. Angela was still out there playing the grieving wife role to perfection, harvesting likes and sympathy while sitting in a house built by my sweat and maintained by my calloused hands. She was raising our children with the absolute, arrogant certainty that their father was a broken man who would never, ever fight back. She was wrong. I wasn't coming home to beg for a place at her table. I was coming for something else entirely. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I wasn't interested in cold. I was aiming for something quiet, precise, and undeniably final. The sharpening of the blade. By the time the crisp, biting air of autumn settled over Maple Hollow, turning the leaves into brittle shards of crimson and gold, I was unrecognizable. My hair had grown out, the silver at my temples more prominent now, like a badge of rank I'd finally earned. I'd lost weight, not the sickly kind, but the lean, hard-won muscle of a man who worked all day and ate only what he needed. But the biggest change wasn't physical, it was my posture. The silence that used to feel like a retreat, a way to hide from Angela's barbs, now felt like a suit of armor. I wasn't licking my wounds anymore. I was sharpening knives. Not literal steel, I'm not a monster, but a mental edge that was becoming lethal. Disappearing is a parlor trick that freaks people out. But reappearing? Reappearing as someone they no longer recognize and, more importantly, someone they can no longer control? That is a nightmare. The digital ghost. Phase 1 required intelligence. I needed to see the world I had left behind without the filter of Angela's ego. I created a burner Facebook account. No photo, no real name, and added a few peripheral figures. Old work buddies from the factory, a couple of high school acquaintances, and even a few of Angela's distant cousins who were too polite or too nosy to decline a friend request. I became a ghost in the machine. I didn't post. I didn't like. I just watched. Angela's profile was a masterclass in suburban propaganda. There she was at a pumpkin patch, the kids flanking her, all of them wearing coordinated sweaters. #blessed, #stronger together. There was a birthday shout out to Josh. Can't believe my big man is 16 today. Accompanied by a photo of him grinning, flashing a brand new Apple Watch that I knew damn well was bought with the emergency savings I'd left behind. There were Sunday brunch selfies with her sister captioned, "Strong moms stick together." But as I scrolled, a cold knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't about what she was posting. It was about what was missing. There were no photos of Owen, no mentions of his soccer games, no first day of 4th grade snaps. Nothing. It was as if he had been systematically erased from the family's public narrative. That told me everything I needed to know. Something had shifted. The sweet one was likely the only one still asking about me. And in Angela's world, that made him an inconvenience, the betrayal in the Dropbox. I still had one ace up my sleeve, our shared Dropbox account. Angela, in her technological arrogance, had never bothered to change the password. She probably assumed I was too tool-shed to remember it. One rainy Sunday, as the wind rattled my studio window, I logged in. I saw a new folder. College apps. Emily. I opened her personal statement first. Emily had always boasted about being a writer, a truth teller. The essay started with a lofty Maya Angelou quote about courage. Then, I hit the paragraph that made the blood in my veins turn to ice. Growing up, my father was physically present but emotionally absent. He lived in our house like a shadow, silent, grim, and perpetually disappointed. While he offered nothing but a cold vacuum of space, my mother taught me everything I know about strength, about joy, and about how to rise above people who don't see your worth. I read it 4 times. It didn't hurt. Not in the way she intended. It was too clinical for that. It was a revelation. She wasn't just mocking me at the dinner table anymore. She was rewriting history to buy her way into a university. She was using my silence as a stepping stone, painting me as a villain to make herself look like a survivor. And Angela? Angela had clearly nurtured this lie because it served her narrative too, the secret letter. I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I needed an ally on the inside, someone who hadn't been poisoned by the just-a-joke culture of that house. I needed Owen. It took me 3 days to find the words. I couldn't call. Angela would intercept it and turn it into a weapon. I couldn't email. She probably monitored his tablet. So I went old school. I sat at my small wooden table and wrote a letter by hand. I put it in a plain white envelope. No return address. For a cover, I used the address of the local Maple Hollow Library. Inside, I kept it simple, my handwriting shaking only slightly. Hey buddy, I want you to know that I am safe. I think about you every single day. I want you to know, truly know, that I didn't leave because of you. You are the best part of me, Owen. Keep your head up. I'm working on a way for us to talk soon. Love, Dad. I dropped it in the blue mailbox at the corner, watching it disappear into the slot. The game was no longer about hiding. It was about choosing the exact moment to let the shadow come back into the light. I dropped that letter into the slot on a Monday, and for the next 5 days, I was a ghost haunting my own skin. I paced the length of my tiny studio until I'd worn a path in the beige carpet. Every hour was a silent interrogation. Did he get it? Did Angela's hawk-like eyes spot the plain envelope first? Did she steam it open over a pot of tea and laugh at my desperation? By the time Saturday rolled around, I had fully convinced myself I'd be sitting in that library alone, a middle-aged man waiting for a ghost. I arrived 30 minutes early. I found a corner in the children's section, tucked behind a shelf of colorful picture books, trying to look inconspicuous with a stack of old Garfield comics and a cardboard cup of coffee that had long since gone cold and bitter. 2:59 p.m. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. 3:01 p.m. The silence of the library felt like it was mocking me. 3:02 p.m. Then a voice, barely above a whisper, shattered the quiet. Dad. I stood up so abruptly I nearly sent a spinning rack of bookmarks clattering to the floor. Owen was there. He looked different. Taller, leaner, his face losing that soft little boy roundness. He had his hands jammed deep into the pockets of a dark hoodie, and his eyes, those big, soulful brown eyes, were swimming in unshed tears. Hey, bud, I managed to choke out. He didn't run to me. He didn't make a scene. He just stood there, vibrating with a decade's worth of unspoken questions. He looked like he was trying to decide if I was real or just another ghost dad story. You're really okay? He asked, his voice trembling. Yeah, Owen, I'm really okay. We sat across from each other at a low table meant for toddlers. His backpack hit the carpet with a heavy, final thud. For a long minute, we just stared at each other. Then the poison started to leak out. Emily said you left because you didn't want to be our dad anymore, he whispered, refusing to meet my eyes. She said you were going to send lawyers and take all the money from Mom. My throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. That's not true, Owen. Not even a single word of it. I left because sometimes grown-ups have to make incredibly hard choices to protect their hearts. It had nothing to do with you. You're the best thing I ever did. I reached into my jacket and pulled out that water-stained drawing of the 2 stick figures under the crooked sun. I still have it, I said. That was the breaking point. He lunged across the tiny table, nearly upending the chairs, and buried his face in my chest. I held him until my arms went numb, breathing in the scent of his laundry detergent and the outside world. Reports from the war zone. We talked for an hour. It wasn't about the big stuff. It was about the life I'd left behind. He told me about his new math teacher and how Josh had been caught red-handed cheating on a history quiz, only for Angela to go into mama bear mode and charm the administration into a slap on the wrist. He told me Emily barely left her room, spending her nights with a boyfriend who wore eyeliner and apparently referred to me as a legendary absentee. But the part that made my jaw set was when he talked about Angela. Mom's always mad now. he said, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. She used to laugh more. Now she's just loud. She's mad about the dishes, the internet, the lawn. Last week, her car battery died in the driveway, and she spent 20 minutes screaming at the steering wheel because you weren't there to jumpstart it. I couldn't help it. A small, dark part of me smiled. The maintenance guy was gone, and the bubbly, capable wife was realizing that life without a servant is a lot less #blessed. Before we parted ways, 3 blocks from the house, Owen looked up at me with a sudden, sharp clarity. I know you didn't leave me, Dad. I know. That was all I needed. I had my why. Now, it was time to build my how. The conspiracy of assets. Back at the factory, I had managed a crew of 15 guys. One of them was Carl, an older man who wore tinfoil hat energy like a badge of honor, but was a literal genius when it came to gray market finances. Carl didn't trust the government, the banks, or his own shadow, but he taught me the art of structuring assets so they simply vanished. I called Carl. I told him I needed something bulletproof. You divorcing her or disappearing? He asked with a raspy chuckle. A bit of both, I said. We spent 2 weeks drafting the paperwork. My tool review site was actually making real money now. Not millions, but enough to be a threat if Angela ever got her hands on it. The YouTube channel had hit 3,000 subscribers, and brands were starting to send free gear for shoutouts. I moved everything. The domain, the revenue, the intellectual property, into an anonymous business trust. The address was a P.O. box in a state I'd never visited. The sole beneficiary? Owen. In 10 years, when he hit 18, he'd inherit a thriving business and a mountain of cash that Angela wouldn't even know existed. To the world, I was just Steve from Maple Hollow. To the law, I was a man with 0 traceable income. Then, I reached out to a guy named Dave from the factory. He owed me big for covering his tail during a nasty OSHA audit. Still know that lawyer cousin of yours? I asked. The one who specializes in quiet asset separation? Sean, what are you planning? Dave asked, his voice low. I'm just protecting what's mine, I replied. 2 weeks later, I met Jill. She looked like a mild-mannered librarian, but the moment she opened her mouth, she spoke with the precision of a surgical scalpel. Sharp, sterile, deadly. I'm not looking to burn her world down, I told her, sliding a folder across the table. I just want to make sure she can't take me for a ride when the disappointment doesn't show up for work anymore. Jill nodded, a thin, predatory smile touching her lips. Smart man. Let's make sure you're as invisible on paper as you are in person. Jill was a different kind of predator. She didn't hunt with claws, she hunted with fine print. You want to play chess, Sean? Not war, she told me during one of our late-night strategy sessions in her wood-paneled office. We began setting up safeguards that were essentially emotional and financial landmines. I documented everything. Every dollar I'd poured into that mortgage, every receipt from Emily's specialized tutors, every credit card statement where I'd footed the bill for Angela's lifestyle. I even saved a digital copy of Emily's college essay. Not to weaponize it in a petty way, but to have a record of the fiction they were selling to the world. But it was Jill's final piece of advice that truly recalibrated my soul. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is total indifference. If you rebuild your life so completely that they can no longer touch you, it hurts them more than any shouting match ever could. She was right. But I wasn't quite ready for total silence. I needed one final act. I needed to walk back into their world, not as the disappointment they had manufactured, but as a man who had reclaimed his own narrative. The perfect opportunity was already glaring at me from the calendar. Josh's 16th birthday. The stakeout in the shadows, Angela was throwing a massive backyard bash. I tracked the details through her public Facebook event, the classic look at how well we're doing without him celebration. There was a big white tent, expensive string lights, and a professional DJ. Her sister was busy tagging half the town in the guest list. She'd left the event privacy settings open, a slip-up born of her desperate need for attention. Saturday arrived in late October. The sky was a bruised, perfect purple, but the wind had that sharp, jagged edge that warned of a coming winter. I parked my Silverado 4 houses down, tucked into the shadows of a large oak tree. I sat there with the engine off, watching the house I used to maintain like a stranger casing a high-value target. I wasn't dressed for a confrontation. I didn't wear a tough guy leather jacket or some dramatic disguise. I wore my work flannel, dark jeans, and boots that were still dusted with the gravel from the Maple Hollow diner. I looked like a man who worked for a living, because I was. From the street, I could see the backyard lit up like a boutique wedding. Fairy lights sparkled against the fence, and a Bluetooth speaker was pumping out generic pop hits just loud enough to mask the forced laughter of parents who probably felt obligated to be there. I watched Angela through the gap in the gate. She was in her element, swirling a glass of expensive red wine, leaning into her sister's shoulder, and flashing that perfect mother smile at the neighbors. Everything looked perfectly under control, until I stepped into the light. The resurrection of the punchline. I didn't wait for an invite. I didn't knock. I waited for a lull in the music, that brief, echoing silence between tracks. Then I pushed open the side gate and walked onto the lawn. The effect was instantaneous. It was like someone had sucked the oxygen out of the backyard. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks frozen in midair, loaded with expensive catering. Angela's wine glass stopped inches from her lips, her eyes widening in a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated fury. Josh, standing by the cake, looked like he'd seen a literal ghost. Emily, perched on the edge of a fire pit with her eyeliner-clad boyfriend, locked eyes with me and muttered, "No freaking way," loud enough for the first 3 rows of guests to hear. I gave a slow, respectful nod. I didn't come in hot. I didn't come in screaming. I just stood there, grounded and calm. "Hey, everyone," I said, my voice projecting with a confidence I'd never felt in that yard. "Just dropping by." Angela broke her paralysis first, storming toward me, her face a mask of tight, vibrating tension. "Sean, what the hell are you doing here? This is completely inappropriate." I glanced around at the crowd, the neighbors who had heard her missing person stories, the coworkers who thought I'd had a breakdown. I kept my voice level. "I thought I'd wish my son a happy birthday. Is that against the law now?" Josh hadn't moved an inch. He was clutching a brand new pair of high-end headphones like a security blanket. Thanks," he stammered, his bravado completely evaporated. I reached into my flannel pocket and pulled out a small square box. It wasn't jewelry or a gadget. It was something I'd found in a dusty corner of a secondhand music shop in Maple Hollow, a vintage vinyl pressing of Pink Floyd's The Wall. I'd played it for him when he was 9 years old. He'd hated the music back then, but he'd spend hours staring at the surreal, haunting cover art. "Happy birthday, Josh," I said, handing it to him. He took it silently. He didn't offer a hug and he didn't say thank you, but I noticed his fingers grip the cardboard tight. He didn't hand it back. The breaking point. Angela stepped into my personal space, her voice dropping to a low, venomous hiss so the guests wouldn't hear. "You can't just show up like this, Sean. You left us. You abandoned this family. You don't get to play dad when it's convenient for you." I looked her dead in the eye. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't afraid of her disapproval. "I raised him for 15 years, Angela. I'm the one who scrubbed the graffiti off his bedroom walls. I'm the one who worked double shifts to pay for those braces he's wearing. And I'm the one who coached his league when you were too busy at brunch. I've earned 5 minutes of his time." She bristled, her chest heaving. "This isn't about you. You walked out on your responsibilities." "No," I corrected her, my voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as granite. "I walked out on you. Don't twist the narrative for your audience, Angela. They might actually believe you." The air between us was electric. The party was effectively over. Everyone was just waiting for the explosion. But then the silence was shattered by a frantic thud of footsteps. Without warning, Owen darted from the back porch. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look at his mother's face for permission. He threw himself at me, his small arms wrapping around my waist so tight it nearly knocked the wind out of me, though. In that moment, in front of the neighbors, the sister, and the cool kids, the world's biggest disappointment was the only person in the world that little boy wanted to hold on to. Owen didn't just run. He collided with me. He wrapped his small arms around my waist with a desperate bone-deep grip, as if he were afraid I'd dissolve into smoke if he let go. In child time, 3 months is an eternity, a lifetime of wondering if you've been forgotten. Dad, he choked out, the word muffled against my flannel shirt. I knelt in the dirt of the yard I used to mow every Saturday, hugging him back with a ferocity that made my own ribs ache. I've got you, buddy. I'm right here. Angela's face went from a heated red to a ghostly porcelain white. The wine glass in her hand trembled. Owen, get back here right now, she commanded, her voice thin and shrill. You don't know what you're doing. But Owen didn't budge. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes shining with a defiant clarity that no 9-year-old should have to possess. No, Mom, he said, his voice carrying across the silent lawn. You lied. A collective gasp rippled through the neighbors. Angela's jaw literally dropped. Excuse me? You said Dad didn't want to see us. You told everyone at brunch he abandoned us because he was selfish. But he sent me letters, Mom. He met me at the library. You never even asked me if I heard from him. You just told everyone he was gone for good. The whispers spread like a wildfire in a dry forest. Emily suddenly found her expensive shoes very interesting, refusing to look up. Josh took a hesitant step back, his eyes darting between me and the mother who had curated his reality for the last few months. Angela tried to pivot, her hostess mask slipping into place. Owen, honey, you don't understand. Adult relationships are… Stop, Owen snapped. I'd never heard that much strength in his voice. You told us he was a disappointment, but he's the only one who actually listened when I talked. You just talk at us. The final audit. I stood up slowly, tall for the first time in that zip code. I looked at the crowd, the people who had judged me based on Angela's carefully crafted narrative. You want the truth, Angela? I said, my voice low but carrying like a bell. You want everyone here to know what really happened? That mug you all laughed at? That wasn't the reason I left. It was just the final, pathetic insult. The real betrayal was death by 1,000 dismissals. You erased me from your world one day at a time, and you spent 18 years teaching our kids to treat their father like a piece of faulty equipment. People were shifting uncomfortably. 2 neighbors were already pretending to scroll through their phones, looking for an exit. Angela's sister was slowly backing toward the house, clearly terrified of being caught in the blast radius. And while you were painting yourself as the abandoned martyr, I continued, a cold smile touching my lips. I wasn't just blowing off steam. I was building something. Angela scoffed, trying to regain her footing. What? A shack in the woods? A collection of rusted wrenches? I pulled out a business card. It was thick, matte white, and elegant. Wrenchwise Media, owner and editor-in-chief. I didn't give it to her. I handed it to Josh. That tool site you follow, Josh? The YouTube channel you showed me last year? The one with the straight talk reviews? That's me. It's been me all along. Josh's eyes went wide. He looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card. You're the Wrenchwise guy? Dad, you said the guy behind that channel makes thousands a month in affiliate cuts. You said he was a legend in the DIY community. I nodded. I am. And I did it while I was invisible to you guys. Then I turned to Emily. The fire pit cast long, flickering shadows across her face. I read your college essay, Emily. I know you called me emotionally absent. I know you painted me as a grim shadow to get a sympathy vote from an admissions board. And maybe I was a shadow, but only because you and your mother made me feel like a trespasser in my own home. You wanted a tragic backstory for your application? Fine. Just make sure it's a story you can live with when you're older. Emily didn't respond. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her boyfriend looked like he wanted to phase through the fence and disappear into the night. The departure for real this time. I looked around the yard one last time. Here is what is going to happen, I said, letting the silence settle like heavy snow. This is the last time I set foot on this property. I won't be back for my tools. I won't be back for the furniture, and I certainly won't be back for the jokes. But Owen? He's welcome at my place in Maple Hollow anytime he wants. I've already filed for formal visitation. My lawyer, Jill, says the judge is going to find your world's biggest disappointment gift very enlightening. Angela looked like she wanted to scream, to rage, to claw back the control, but she knew the audience had flipped. She stayed silent. I'm not asking for your money, and I'm not asking for custody of kids who don't want me, I said, stepping toward the gate. I'm just reclaiming my respect. I paused at the latch. Oh, and if anyone here wants the full context of why the maintenance guy vanished, just Google my name in a week. The whole story is going live. Names changed to protect the innocent, which mostly just means Owen. But the world deserves to see what a disappointment actually looks like when he decides he's done. I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't look back when Owen yelled, "Can I come stay with you next weekend?" I didn't look back when Angela finally found her voice and called my name, a sharp, desperate sound that faded into the autumn wind. I didn't even look back when the DJ finally cut the music, leaving that expensive, fairy-lit backyard in a silence so thick it was deafening. The reveal. I drove back to Maple Hollow with the windows down, the cold air filling my lungs. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and hit publish on a long-form post I'd been polishing for weeks. Title: World's Biggest Disappointment. How I walked away from a toxic life and built a world they can't touch. The story exploded. Within 48 hours, it was on the front page of Medium. It was shared by thousands of fathers, discussed by therapists, and linked by tech tubers who had no idea their tool guy had such a heavy story. But the win didn't come from the clicks. It came 3 days later in the form of a short, shaky email. Dad, I read your post. I read the whole thing. I didn't know about the invoice or the way Mom talked about you in the garage. I'm sorry. I want to talk for real this time. Emily. It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was a crack in the ice. I sat back in my chair, looking out at the quiet streets of Maple Hollow. I hadn't won because I hurt them. I hadn't won because I embarrassed them. I won because I realized that my worth was never something they gave me. It was something they had been borrowing, and I finally took it back. They didn't break me. They revealed me. And I've never been stronger. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for my channel. Your support means everything. See you in the next one.